My name is Lydia Montgomery. I was 27 years old when my stepmother decided my life's work belonged to her daughter. I didn't know it when I walked into my father's house that Sunday evening, but the dinner table had already been converted into a courtroom. The air felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, too arranged, like everyone had rehearsed their lines and I was the only one who hadn't been given the script. The dining room lights were brighter than usual, reflecting harshly off the polished mahogany table. My stepmother, Diane, sat at the head like a judge, presiding over a verdict already decided. To her right sat her daughter, Rebecca, back straight, lips curved into a smug little smile that made my stomach tighten. My father wouldn't look at me. My half-brother Caleb, only 13, sat frozen in his chair, eyes darting between faces, clearly sensing danger without understanding it. "Sit down, Lydia," Diane said, her voice coated in syrupy sweetness, the kind she only used when she was about to do something cruel. "We need to talk about your future." I placed my purse down carefully, buying myself a few seconds. My fingers were already trembling. "What about my future?" I asked. Diane smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Rebecca shifted excitedly in her chair, practically vibrating. "You've had your success," Diane continued smoothly. "Rebecca just graduated. She needs an opportunity. And you, well, you already have this company." My company. 4 years earlier, fresh out of MIT, I had built an AI-powered supply chain optimization platform, alone in a studio apartment in Cambridge. I coded until 3 a.m, lived on cold coffee and stubborn hope, and poured every ounce of myself into making it work. Now we had 52 employees and $18 million in annual revenue. It wasn't just a company. It was my child, my proof, my mother's legacy. "Be a real family," Diane said, sliding a folder across the table. "Transfer majority ownership to your sister. She needs it more than you do." The room spun. For a moment, I genuinely thought I'd misheard her. Then I saw the documents. Formal, legal-looking. My company's name stamped across the top like a brand. "You're serious?" My voice came out thin, barely recognizable. "You're young," Diane replied calmly. "You'll bounce back. Rebecca has student loans. She struggled through college. You've already had enough success. It's time to share." Rebecca nodded eagerly. "I've already told my friends I'm taking over a tech company," she said. "Don't embarrass me. This is basically done." I looked at my father. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there made my blood go cold. Resignation. "You're okay with this?" I asked. "You think this is reasonable?" He shifted in his seat. "Diane thinks it would bring the family closer. Maybe you could work something out, some kind of partnership." "Work something out? I built that company," I said, my voice breaking despite myself. Every line of code, every pitch, every failure, that was me. Diane's smile vanished. "Think about what's best for this family, Lydia. Or are you too selfish to help your own sister?" That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake replaying her words, feeling the familiar knot in my chest, the same one I'd carried for 7 years. Ever since Diane entered our lives and quietly made it clear that nothing I did would ever be enough. It took me back to when my mother died of ovarian cancer when I was 15. 3 years later, Dad met Diane at a hospital fundraiser. "She makes me feel alive again," he'd said. At first, she was warm, interested, supportive. Then she married my father, and everything changed. When I started building my company in Dad's garage, Diane was horrified. "This tech phase is cute," she'd said, "but when are you getting a real job?" I moved out in 3 months. I funded my startup with the $75,000 my mother had saved her entire life as a third-grade teacher. Money she'd earned while dying. Money she made Dad promise to give me when I was ready. And now Diane wanted me to hand over what that money built. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Please consider Diane's suggestion. Family harmony matters more than business. Your mother would want us all to get along." I threw my phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. And in that moment, something inside me fractured too, because I finally understood something terrifying. This wasn't about family. This was about taking what I had built and seeing if I would hand it over without a fight. The morning after that dinner, I woke up with the same sensation you get after a car accident. Not the pain, yet. The stunned, floating disbelief. The kind where your body moves through routine while your mind keeps replaying one moment over and over, trying to locate the exact second everything went wrong. My bedroom smelled faintly of lavender detergent, the same one my mother used when I was a kid. I used it on purpose. It was one of the few ways I still knew how to keep her close. I stared at the crack in my wall where my phone had hit. The screen lay on the floor in fractured pieces, like a warning. Family harmony matters more than business. Your mother would want us all to get along. My mother. I swung my legs out of bed so fast the room tilted. For a second, I thought I might throw up. Instead, I sat there, breathing through the nausea, palms pressed to my eyes. Mom had wanted peace, yes, but not like this. Not peace bought by cutting pieces off me and handing them to someone else. I made coffee I couldn't taste and opened my laptop. There were emails from employees, normal questions, client timelines, a product meeting scheduled for noon. My company didn't pause just because my personal life was imploding, and somehow that made it worse. Because Diane and Rebecca weren't demanding a percentage of an idea. They weren't asking for a favor. They were demanding I amputate something living, something with 52 paychecks depending on it, something I'd built from sleepless nights and failing prototypes, something that felt more real than the family sitting at my father's table. My inbox pinged. A new notification. Rebecca had posted again. A selfie in a blazer I knew she'd bought with Dad's credit card. Caption, "Big things coming, family business, CEO energy." The comments were full of heart emojis and congrats and so proud, and my hands started shaking so badly I had to close the laptop. It wasn't just entitlement. It was performance. She wasn't trying to earn my company. She was trying to step into it like it was a dress waiting to be tailored around her. My phone buzzed again. Not my broken phone, my work phone, the one I kept for emergencies. "Unknown number," I answered, already braced. "Lydia," Diane said brightly, like we were old friends planning brunch instead of enemies negotiating theft. "Good morning." I said nothing. "You had a lot of emotion last night," she continued. "I understand. Big decisions can feel overwhelming, but we can do this calmly, like adults." "What you asked me to do isn't a decision," I said. My voice surprised me, steady, cold. "It's extortion in a cardigan." She laughed softly, a sound that carried no humor. "You always dramatize," she said. "That's been your problem since you were a teenager. You take everything personally." My throat tightened. Because that was Diane's gift. Turning your reaction into the problem instead of her behavior. She could stab you and then ask why you were bleeding on her carpet. "Rebecca is anxious," Diane went on. "She's sensitive, you know that. She feels rejected." "They want my company," I said, forcing each word out carefully. "Not my love." "You act like you created it in a vacuum," Diane snapped, the sweetness slipping. "Your father supported you, gave you space, gave you money, gave you stability. You wouldn't be where you are without us." Without us. As if my mother had never existed. As if my grief had been Diane's personal charity project. "I'll call you later," she said, voice sugary again, like a switch flipped. "Think about it. Be generous. Be family." The call ended before I could respond. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the blank screen, feeling something dark and old rise in my chest. 7 years. That's how long Diane had been shaping this narrative. 7 years of tiny cuts that never looked like wounds until you stepped back and realized you'd been bleeding the whole time. It started after Mom died. People talk about grief like it's one dramatic event, like a funeral, a breakdown, a moment you can point to and say, "That's when my life split in two." For me, grief was quieter. It was empty chairs, silence in the hallway at night, the way my father looked through me sometimes, like he was searching for someone behind my face. Mom died when I was 15, and for a while, Dad and I became two ghosts haunting the same house. He tried. He really did. But grief hollowed him out from the inside. 3 years later, he met Diane at a hospital fundraiser for cancer research. I remember the first time I saw her. She was polished, confident, the kind of woman who filled a room without raising her voice. She wore a soft blue dress and laughed like she had never spent a night staring at a ceiling, praying for someone to breathe. Dad introduced her with eyes that looked awake. "This is Diane," he'd said, almost shy. "She makes me feel alive again." Alive again. I wanted that for him. God, I did. At first, Diane acted like she wanted me too. She asked about school, about MIT, about the algorithms I was obsessed with. She touched my shoulder when she spoke, smiled directly into my eyes, said things like, "You're so impressive, Lydia." Rebecca was older than me, 22 when I was 19. We weren't close, but we were cordial in that thin, polite way people are when they don't want to admit they don't like each other. Then Dad married Diane, and it was like someone flicked a switch. The warmth drained out of her, replaced by constant correction. It started small. "That's what you're wearing to dinner?" she'd ask, tone light, like she was helping. "Don't you want to make a good impression?" Or, "Are you sure MIT is the best fit?" she'd say at family gatherings, smiling as if she was proud. I mean, it's competitive. Not everyone thrives in that kind of environment. It was always wrapped in concern, always delivered in front of other people, impossible to challenge without looking dramatic. And Dad would just sit there, quiet, like he was afraid that defending me would cost him her affection. I learned early that Diane didn't need to scream to control a room. She just needed to imply that I was difficult, oversensitive, ungrateful. When I started building my first prototype in Dad's garage, my laptop balanced on a folding table, wires everywhere, my notebooks filled with messy equations, Diane looked at me like I'd dragged mud onto her white carpet. "This tech phase is cute," she'd said, smiling in that same syrupy way. "But when are you getting a real job? Your father needs his space back." I'd been 19 then, fueled by grief and ambition, and something that felt like rage disguised as determination. Dad had offered me the garage because he believed in me. But when Diane started complaining, he gave me 4 months. "Just to keep the peace," he'd said. I moved out in 3. Not because I didn't need him, because I could feel her waiting for me to fail, and I refused to hand her that victory. I used my mother's inheritance as seed money. $75,000. My mother had saved it while teaching 3rd grade for 26 years, saving meticulously, even while her body was being eaten alive. She made Dad promise, on her deathbed, to give it to me when I was ready. Every dollar felt sacred. It wasn't just money. It was her belief. So when Diane slid those papers across the table, demanding I sign away control of what I'd built, it didn't just feel like theft. It felt like she was reaching into my mother's grave and trying to take what was left. My work phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from Caleb. "Mom says you're being selfish. That's not true, right? You'd never hurt Rebecca on purpose, would you?" I stared at the text until my eyes blurred. They were using him. A 13-year-old boy with a soft heart and a desperate need to believe the adults in his life weren't liars. I typed back slowly. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but I'm not giving away my company. That doesn't make me selfish." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. He didn't respond, and something in me sank. Because Diane wasn't just coming for my business. She was coming for my relationships, for my reputation, for the last fragile threads connecting me to my father's house. I went to the window and looked down at the street below, the city moving like nothing had changed. Somewhere inside, grief whispered like static, and beneath it, something sharper formed. A realization I couldn't unsee anymore. Diane had been preparing for this moment for years, and if I didn't fight back now, she would rewrite my entire life until I barely recognized it. By the end of that week, it stopped feeling like a family disagreement and started feeling like a siege. It wasn't loud at first. No screaming phone calls. No dramatic confrontations, just pressure, constant, relentless, coming from every direction at once. Diane didn't call again after that morning. Instead, she shifted tactics. Silence can be louder than threats when it's calculated. Rebecca filled the void. She started posting daily. Photos in business clothes, quotes about female leadership and stepping into your destiny, vague captions that suggested momentum without specifics. People assumed. They always do. Old classmates messaged me congratulations I didn't deserve. Former professors wrote warm notes about family entrepreneurship. Even one of our junior engineers hesitantly stopped by my office to ask if leadership changes were coming. I smiled, reassured, lied. Inside, something twisted tighter every day. My father called twice that week. Both times he sounded exhausted, like a man trying to hold a door closed with his body while something heavy leaned against it from the other side. Just talk to them, he said during the second call. They feel shut out. They want my company, I replied. That's not a feeling, that's a demand. He sighed, long, heavy. I invested in you early on, he said carefully. That gives me some responsibility here. The word responsibility landed wrong. You gave me $30,000 as a graduation gift, I said. You wrote it in the card. Diane's voice cut in faintly from the background. Gifts can be reclassified. My stomach dropped. Dad cleared his throat. She thinks legally it might be considered a loan. Loan. A word so small, it almost sounded harmless. A word that could destroy everything. You're saying you might sue me, I said quietly. No, he said too fast. God, no. I'm just saying maybe we could use that as leverage. Get you all to the table, work something out. Leverage. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. I sat on my office floor afterward, back against the wall, breathing through the familiar tightness in my chest. This wasn't grief anymore. This was betrayal calcifying into strategy. And the worst part? They were convincing themselves they were right. Rebecca sent me a message that night. I don't understand why you're doing this. I've struggled more than you. You've always been naturally gifted. It's fair that things balance out. Balance out. As if success were a pie that got smaller the more you ate. As if discipline, sacrifice, and obsession were genetic advantages, instead of choices that cost you sleep, relationships, and sanity. I didn't reply, because every response felt like stepping into a trap. The next morning, my assistant Bailey knocked on my office door, face tight. Someone called asking about our ownership structure, she said. They said they were doing preliminary diligence for an investor. My blood went cold. Did they identify themselves? She said her name was Sandra Morrison. I didn't need to ask the last question. Diane's sister. Corporate attorney, Chicago. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't emotional pressure anymore. This was coordinated. I called Preston Clark immediately. Preston and I had gone to MIT together. He started in computer science before switching to law, which made him dangerously competent at understanding both code and contracts. He answered on the second ring. Tell me everything, he said. I did. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end. Your documents are solid, Preston said finally. I made sure of that from day one. You own 72%. Your board is clean. Your audits are boring, in the best way. Relief hit, sharp and brief. But, he continued, the fact that Sandra is sniffing around means they're building a case. Not a good one, but one designed to intimidate. What do I do? We document everything, he said. Every call, every text, every social media post. And we prepare for escalation. Escalation came faster than either of us expected. 3 days later, Diane showed up at my office. Unannounced. Rebecca was with her. Both of them were dressed like they were attending a board meeting. Tailored blazers, heels clicking aggressively against the polished floor. Bailey stood her ground like a fortress. Ms. Montgomery isn't available, she said calmly. Would you like to schedule an appointment? We are family, Rebecca snapped. Get her out here. I stepped into the lobby before it could turn into a scene. This is my workplace, I said evenly. You don't get to barge in. Diane smiled, cold. We have a legal right to understand the company structure. No, you don't, I replied. My father has zero ownership. She handed me an envelope. Official letterhead, Sandra Morrison, attorney at law. The language inside was aggressive, demands for an emergency shareholder meeting, financial disclosures, ownership transparency, 14-day deadline. They were serious. And they were sloppy. Because entitlement always mistakes confidence for competence. I called Preston the moment they left. "Call the board," he said. "Let them present whatever fantasy they've constructed. We end this in daylight." The board meeting was set for the following Tuesday. I didn't sleep the night before, not from fear, from anger, from the deep, corrosive kind that forms when people decide your boundaries are negotiable. The conference room filled slowly that morning. Preston sat beside me. Across from us were Dr. Sarah Chen, one of our earliest investors, Antonio Rodriguez, who had built and sold 3 companies, and Devin Wright, my COO, people who had earned their seats. Diane, Rebecca, and Sandra sat opposite us like an invading delegation. Sandra didn't bother with pleasantries. "My clients believe there has been financial impropriety," she began. "Stop," Preston said sharply. "Be specific." Sandra slid documents across the table. "They believe Ms. Montgomery misused family assets to build this company." "What family assets?" I asked. Rebecca leaned forward, suddenly confident. "You used Dad's reputation," she said. "His connections, his name. That has value." Dr. Chen laughed, out loud. "I invested because of Lydia's algorithm," she said. "Not a dentist in Boston." Sandra's smile tightened. "We have documented 23 instances of leveraged family networking." "Barbecues," Devin said flatly. "You're describing barbecues." Diane's composure cracked. "She's been flaunting her success while Rebecca struggles," she snapped. "A real sister would share." Antonio leaned forward slowly. "A real mother wouldn't try to steal from her stepdaughter," he said. The room went quiet. Rebecca stood abruptly. "I deserve this," she said. "I've prepared for it." "How?" I asked gently. "You've never worked in tech." "I don't need to," she replied. "That's what employees are for." Devin shook his head. "This meeting is hostile," Sandra interrupted. "No," Preston said. "This meeting is honest." Diane stood, furious. "We supported her," she shouted. "We gave her a home after her mother died." "How?" I asked quietly. "By telling me I'd fail? By pushing me out? By calling my work a phase?" Silence. Then a voice from the doorway. "Is that true?" Caleb stood there, backpack still on his shoulders, eyes wet. "You lied to me," he said, voice breaking. "You said she was selfish, but I heard you tell Aunt Sandra you'd sell the company once Rebecca had it." The room exploded. Rebecca's face drained of color. Sandra gathered her papers too quickly. "This meeting is over." But it was already done, because the truth had entered the room, and it refused to leave. After the board meeting imploded, I expected silence. I didn't get it. What I got was escalation, cleaner, sharper, more dangerous. The kind that doesn't come with raised voices or emotional pleas, but with paperwork, deadlines, and the quiet confidence of people who believe intimidation will do the work for them. The day after Caleb exposed Diane's real plan, my inbox filled with requests that had nothing to do with our actual operations. Requests for historical financials going back years. Requests for internal governance documents that weren't legally required. Requests for clarification on compensation structures. Mine specifically. They came from Sandra. Each email was polite, professional, almost friendly, and every single one was designed to rattle me. Preston called me as soon as he saw them. "They're phishing," he said, "not because they have evidence, because they want to create the illusion of doubt. This is how weak cases survive. They make enough noise that people start wondering if smoke means fire." "I'm not backing down," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why we do this right." We met that afternoon in his office, the walls lined with law books and framed patents from his early tech days. He spread my corporate documents across the table like a map of territory we were preparing to defend. "Your structure is solid," he said again, "but we tighten everything. No verbal communication. Everything in writing. You don't respond to Sandra directly. She goes through me." "What about my father?" I asked quietly. Preston looked up. "That's harder," he said honestly, "because this isn't just legal. It's emotional leverage." He was right. Dad hadn't called since the board meeting. I wondered if he was ashamed or furious or just tired. 3 days later, Diane made her next move. She showed up at my office again. This time, she came alone. Bailey buzzed me immediately. "She's here," she said, "and she looks calm." That worried me more than rage ever could. I stepped into the lobby, my posture straight, my face unreadable. Diane smiled when she saw me. "I just wanted to talk," she said softly, woman to woman. "You can talk to my attorney," I replied. She sighed theatrically. "Lydia, this doesn't have to get ugly." "It already is," I said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You've always been stubborn, like your mother." The words hit like a slap. "She thought the world owed her something too," Diane continued. "Look where that got her." I felt something snap. Not explosively, but cleanly. "I'm asking you to leave," I said. "Now." Her smile vanished. "You think you're untouchable," she said. "You think that little board meeting protected you. It didn't." She leaned in just enough for me to smell her perfume. "This is bigger than you realize." Security escorted her out. I stood there long after she was gone, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that she wasn't bluffing. She believed this. She believed she was entitled to my life because she had married my father. That night, Preston called again. "They formally requested an emergency shareholder meeting," he said. "They're alleging financial misconduct." My chest tightened. "On what grounds?" "Nothing real," he replied. "But it's enough to force transparency, which we're fine with. What matters is how we frame it." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I spent the days leading up to it buried in documentation, every transaction, every audit, every salary approval. I paid myself $82,000 a year, less than half of what a CEO in my position could justify. I'd done it deliberately, to reinvest, to grow, to protect the company, and now that discipline would protect me. The night before the meeting, I didn't go home. I stayed in my office, lights dimmed, city glowing beyond the glass. I pulled my mother's graduation card out of my bag, the one Dad had written when he gave me the seed money, for my brilliant daughter's dreams. No strings. Just love and pride. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. They could twist the law. They could twist the narrative, but they couldn't erase that. The shareholder meeting was tense from the moment it began. Sandra arrived with a thick folder and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Diane sat beside her, rigid, arms crossed. Rebecca looked uncertain, less confident than before, like someone finally realizing the ground beneath them wasn't solid. Sandra launched into her accusations without preamble. "Ms. Montgomery has paid herself an excessive salary," she said, "transferred funds improperly, and misrepresented company value." Preston didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Her salary is below market," he said. "Approved unanimously by the board, audited quarterly. You have the reports." Sandra flipped pages too quickly. "We also believe proprietary information was misappropriated from a former employer." That one stung, not because it was dangerous, but because it was insulting. Dr. Chen stood. "Lydia developed her algorithm as part of her graduate thesis," she said calmly. "Original work, peer-reviewed. Her advisor can verify that." Sandra hesitated. Diane leaned forward, desperation bleeding through her composure. "She's hiding things," she said sharply. "She's smart. That's how she gets away with it." "And yet," Antonio said evenly, "you haven't produced a single piece of evidence." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. "This is hostile," Sandra snapped. "We came in good faith." "No," Preston replied. "You came with threats." Diane stood abruptly. "She doesn't need all this," she shouted. "It's excessive. One person doesn't deserve that much success." The room went still. I spoke then, not loudly, but clearly. "You don't get to decide what I deserve," I said. "And you don't get to take what you didn't build." Sandra gathered her papers. "This isn't over," she said tightly. I believed her. Because people like Diane don't stop when they lose. They stop when they run out of weapons. And I knew, deep down, that she still had one left. Something reckless. Something final. As the meeting adjourned, Preston leaned toward me. "Be ready," he said quietly. "The next move won't be civil." He was right. I just didn't know how far she was willing to go. The police arrived 3 days later, not quietly, not discreetly. They walked into my office lobby at 10:17 a.m. on a Thursday, just as half my team was finishing stand-up meetings and the other half was grabbing coffee. 2 uniformed officers. One man in a gray suit with a badge clipped to his belt. And behind them, Diane, Rebecca, Sandra. The sight of them together made my stomach drop so fast it felt like the floor vanished beneath me. Bailey rushed into my office, her face drained of color. "Lydia," she said, barely above a whisper. "There are police here. And them." My heart slammed against my ribs, but my voice stayed calm. "Call Preston," I said. "Now." I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked into the lobby. Diane spotted me immediately. "There she is," she said loudly, pointing at me like I was a criminal in a lineup. "She's been embezzling from the company. We have proof. Real proof this time." Every conversation in the room died. I felt 52 pairs of eyes on me. My employees, people who trusted me with their livelihoods, watching as my stepmother tried to publicly dismantle my credibility. I turned to the officers. "I'm Lydia Montgomery," I said evenly, "CEO and majority shareholder. What exactly is being alleged?" The man in the suit stepped forward. "Detective Morrison," he said, "Financial Crimes Division. We received a complaint regarding misappropriation of funds." Sandra handed him a thick folder. "She's been paying herself an excessive salary," Sandra said crisply. "Transferring company funds into personal accounts, misrepresenting valuations to investors." "That's completely false," I said. Diane scoffed. "She's very convincing," she said to the detective. "That's how she's gotten away with it." Before I could respond, Preston appeared at my side, breathless but composed. "You'll need a warrant to access financial records," he said calmly. "And I'd like to know the specific criminal statute being alleged." Detective Morrison flipped through the papers, his brow furrowing. "These are bank statements," he said slowly. "Salary deposits. Documented expenses." "Look deeper," Diane snapped. "She's hiding it. She's smart." "Do you have access to her personal accounts?" the detective asked, looking directly at Diane. Silence. The kind that tells the truth faster than words. I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief, but certainty. "I'll provide everything voluntarily," I said. "Full financial records, personal and corporate. I have nothing to hide." Preston nodded. "And we'll also be filing a complaint for harassment and false reporting," he added. Sandra grabbed Diane's arm. "We should leave," she hissed. But Diane was unraveling now. "You entitled little," she began, her voice rising. "I welcomed you into our family. I gave you a mother's love." "No," I said quietly. "You gave me control wrapped in concern. Criticism disguised as care." She stared at me like she wanted to strike me. Rebecca stepped forward then, her face pale, mascara already smudging. "I didn't know she was going to sell it," she said suddenly. "She told me we'd run it together, that you could stay on as an employee." The words hit harder than Diane's accusations. "You believed that?" I asked. Rebecca's voice cracked. "She said it was fair, that I struggled more, that success should be redistributed." "That's not how life works," I said gently. Detective Morrison cleared his throat. "I'm closing this complaint," he said firmly. "There's no evidence of criminal activity here. Ms. Montgomery, if you wish to pursue charges for a false report, contact the DA's office." He turned to Diane. "I strongly advise you to refrain from further contact regarding business matters. This is harassment." They left in silence. The lobby stayed frozen for a long moment. Then Bailey clapped, slowly, awkwardly. Others joined in, not loud, not celebratory, but supportive. I felt hollow, like I'd won something important and lost something irretrievable at the same time. The aftermath was quieter, but no less devastating. Dad filed for divorce 2 weeks later. The papers cited irreconcilable differences and attempted financial coercion of a family member. Caleb chose to live with him. Diane didn't fight it. Rebecca moved to Philadelphia, took a retail management job. According to Caleb, she was trying. 6 months later, she messaged me. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know." I didn't respond. Not yet. Then something unexpected happened. The State Bar Association contacted Preston. They'd noticed a pattern in Sandra's cases. Multiple false embezzlement claims, similar tactics, similar documentation. Her license was suspended 9 months later, pending investigation. Streamline kept growing. We hit $28 million in revenue that year, expanded to 3 offices, hired 70 more employees. I finally paid myself a real salary. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was Caleb. He started interning with us after school, learning to code from Devin. He had a natural talent and, more importantly, curiosity. One afternoon, I watched him debug a piece of code with quiet focus. "Think you'll want to run this someday?" I asked. He shrugged. "Maybe," he said, "but I'll earn it first, like you did." I smiled. That was the moment I knew Diane hadn't won. Not really. Because she'd tried to take my future, and instead, she'd exposed herself. The divorce didn't explode. It collapsed. Quietly, slowly, like a structure that had been hollow for years and finally gave in under its own weight. My father didn't tell me right away. I heard it from Caleb first, his voice careful, like he was afraid the wrong tone might break something else. "They're not living together anymore," he said one night on the phone. "Dad says it's complicated." It wasn't. It was inevitable. Still, knowing something will happen and watching it actually unfold are 2 different things. Dad asked me to meet him for coffee a week later. The Grind, on Commonwealth Avenue, the same place he used to take me every Saturday morning when Mom was still alive. Back when grief hadn't rearranged everything inside him yet. I almost said no, not because I was angry, but because I was tired. Tired of being the stable one, the forgiving one. The one who understood while everyone else took. But something in his voice stopped me. Not guilt. Shame. I arrived early and sat by the window, watching people pass with their lives intact. Couples laughing, students rushing, ordinary motion that felt strangely foreign. When Dad walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked lighter, older, but clearer. Like someone who had finally admitted something he'd been lying about for years. He smiled when he saw me. Not the forced smile he'd worn for so long, but real warmth. "I'm glad you came," he said softly. We ordered. Coffee for both of us, no pastries. He used to insist on pastries. He didn't this time. "I filed," he said after a moment, hands wrapped tightly around his mug. 2 weeks ago." I nodded. "Caleb's staying with me," he added. Diane didn't fight it. That told me more than anything else could. "She's angry," he continued. "About the house, about the settlement, about everything." "The house Mom helped you buy?" I asked quietly. He winced. "Yes," he said. "I forgot that. Or maybe I pretended to." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. "You let this go on for too long," I said calmly. "So did I." He nodded. No excuses, no deflection. "I was trying to keep the peace," he said. "Trying to be a good husband. Trying not to lose another person after losing your mother." His voice cracked. "But I confused peace with avoidance, and companionship with love." I didn't interrupt, because this wasn't about comforting him. This was about honesty. "Diane made me feel alive again," he admitted. "After your mother died, I felt like a ghost. She made me feel like a man instead of a mourner." He swallowed hard. But feeling alive isn't the same as being happy, and I didn't want to admit that. I stared down at my coffee. "She hated Mom," I said. He closed his eyes. "Yes. Not a defense, not denial, just truth. She never said it directly, at least not at first, but it was always there. The comparisons, the resentment, the way she talked about boring and ordinary." His jaw tightened. I never should have let her speak about Jennifer like that. Never. My chest tightened at the sound of my mother's name spoken without reverence. "She saved her whole life to give me a future," I said. "And Diane tried to take it because she thought it was excessive." Dad's eyes filled. "Your mother was the best person I ever knew," he said hoarsely. "Steady, kind, brilliant in ways people overlook because they're quiet." He reached across the table and took my hand. "And you are exactly like her." That was when I broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the tears came anyway, hot and unstoppable. Because for years, I'd carried the fear that being like my mother made me easy to dismiss, easy to underestimate, easy to sacrifice for someone louder. Hearing him say it like that, without hesitation, felt like something realigning inside me. "I'm seeing a therapist," he said quietly when I could breathe again. 3 times a week. Dr. Patel. She's helping me unpack everything. I almost smiled. "I should have gone years ago," he added. "Before Diane. Before I hurt you." "Almost hurt me," I corrected gently. He nodded. "Almost." We talked for hours. About Mom. About guilt. About how grief can rot into something unrecognizable if you don't face it. He told me things I'd never known. That Mom had wanted to be a pediatrician but couldn't afford medical school. That she chose teaching because she still wanted to help children. That she made him promise on her deathbed to always support my dreams, no matter what they looked like. "She knew," he said softly. "She knew you'd do something extraordinary." I left the coffee shop lighter than I'd felt in years. Not healed, but grounded. Diane moved to Chicago shortly after. Moved in with Sandra, from what I heard. Angry, bitter, convinced the world had stolen something from her. Rebecca stayed quiet. Then, one afternoon, months later, she showed up at my office. Alone. No blazer, no performance. Just jeans, flat shoes, red eyes. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said quickly. I needed to say this in person." I let her speak. "I was jealous," she said, "of how effortless you made it look." "It wasn't effortless," I replied. "I know that now," she said. "I just wasn't watching during the hard parts." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't demand closure. She just told the truth. And that was enough. I watched her leave without stopping her. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. They just need to stop being burned. That night, I stood alone in my office, long after everyone had gone home. The city lights glowed against the windows. The hum of systems and servers filled the space like a heartbeat. I took my mother's graduation card out of my bag again. Read it slowly. For my brilliant daughter's dreams. No strings. Just love and pride. I framed it the next day and hung it on the wall behind my desk. Not as a reminder of what almost got taken, but as proof of what could never be. Because Diane tried to erase my mother's legacy, and instead, she exposed her own. I thought it was over. That was my mistake. When people like Diane lose publicly, they don't reflect. They don't retreat. They don't accept consequences with grace. They look for one last way to hurt you, even if it destroys them in the process. 3 days after my coffee with Dad, Bailey rushed into my office without knocking, something she had never done in 5 years of working together. Her face was pale, not anxious, not flustered, pale. "Lydia," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "There are police in the lobby, 2 of them, and Diane is with them." The room tilted. Not because I was afraid of the police, but because I understood instantly what this was, her last weapon. I stood slowly, smoothing my blazer with deliberate calm. My heart was racing, but my mind felt eerily clear, like everything had narrowed to a single point of focus. "Call Preston," I said. "Now." I walked into the lobby before the fear could catch up to me. 2 uniformed officers stood near the reception desk. A man in a gray suit beside them, badge clipped to his belt. And there she was, Diane, standing tall, chin lifted, wearing that same controlled expression she always used when she believed she was about to win. "That's her," she said loudly, pointing at me. "That's Lydia Montgomery. She's been embezzling from the company. We have concrete proof." The word embezzling echoed through the room like a gunshot. My employees froze. Phones stilled in hands. Conversations died mid-sentence. 52 people watched as my stepmother tried to turn me into a criminal in my own workplace. I turned to the man in the suit. "I'm Lydia Montgomery," I said evenly, "CEO and majority shareholder. What exactly is the allegation? Detective Morrison, he said, flipping open a badge. Financial Crimes Division. We received a complaint regarding misappropriation of corporate funds. Sandra stepped forward, as if on cue. She's been paying herself an excessive salary, she said crisply. Transferring funds to personal accounts, misrepresenting company value to investors. Diane folded her arms. She's very clever, she added. That's how she hides it. Before I could respond, Preston appeared at my side, breathless but composed. You'll need a warrant to seize records, he said calmly. And I'd like to know which statute you're investigating. Detective Morrison flipped through the folder Sandra handed him. These are bank statements, he said slowly. Salary payments, business expenses. Everything appears ordinary. Look harder, Diane snapped. She's hiding it. She's smart. The detective looked up at her. Do you have access to her personal accounts? He asked. Silence. The kind that tells the truth instantly. I will voluntarily provide full financial records, I said. Personal and corporate. I have nothing to hide. Preston nodded. And will also be filing a complaint for harassment and false reporting, he added. Sandra grabbed Diane's arm. We should go, she hissed. But Diane had lost control. You ungrateful little, she began, voice shaking with fury. I gave you everything. A home, a family, a mother. I met her eyes. You gave me conditions, I said quietly. Approval that disappeared the moment I stopped being useful. Rebecca stepped forward then. She looked smaller than I remembered, younger, like the confidence had finally drained out of her. I didn't know she was going to sell it, she said suddenly, her voice cracking. She said we'd run it together, that you could stay on as an employee if you wanted. The room went still. That's what she told you? I asked softly. Rebecca nodded, tears spilling over. She said you had enough, and you believed her, I said. I wanted to, she whispered. Detective Morrison cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. I'm closing this complaint, he said firmly. There is no evidence of criminal activity. Ms. Montgomery, if you wish to pursue charges for filing a false police report, you may contact the district attorney's office. He turned to Diane. I strongly advise you to cease all contact regarding business matters. This is harassment. Diane stared at him in disbelief. You're just going to let her walk away? She demanded. She hasn't committed a crime, he replied evenly. You have. The officers left. So did Sandra, already on her phone, likely calculating damage control. Rebecca lingered for a moment, looking at me like she wanted to say something else. Then she turned and followed her mother. The lobby stayed silent. Then Bailey started clapping, slowly, awkwardly, one clap at a time. Others joined, not loud, not celebratory, just supportive. I smiled faintly. Inside, I felt empty, like something important had ended and something irreversible had begun. The fallout was swift. Preston filed formal complaints the next morning. Harassment, false reporting, attempted extortion. The district attorney's office didn't take long to notice a pattern. Sandra Morrison had advised multiple clients to make similar false embezzlement claims in family business disputes. Same language, same tactics, same intimidation playbook. Her license was suspended 9 months later, pending full investigation. Diane vanished from my life after that. No calls, no texts, no letters. According to Dad, she moved in with Sandra in Chicago and spent most days raging about injustice and betrayal. Rebecca moved to Philadelphia, got a job in retail management, entry level, long hours, real accountability. Caleb told me she was trying. 6 months after the police incident, I got a message from her. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know. I didn't reply. Some apologies aren't meant to be answered. Streamline thrived. Revenue climbed. New offices opened. The company stabilized in ways I'd never had time to focus on while fighting for survival. I finally raised my salary. Still below market, but enough to breathe. But the most unexpected change came from Caleb. He started interning after school, learning code from Devin. He was good. Not prodigy good, but focused, curious, willing to fail. One afternoon, I watched him debug a problem with quiet determination. Think you'll want to run this someday? I asked. He thought for a long moment. Maybe, he said, but I'll earn it. Build something first. Then we can talk. I smiled. That was when I knew. Diane hadn't just failed. She'd lost everything she tried to steal. My business, my credibility, my future. And the last weapon she fired, it had destroyed her instead. Success didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, the way peace usually does, when the chaos finally gets tired of chasing you. 3 months after the police incident, I realized something strange had happened. I woke up one morning and didn't feel dread. No tight chest, no instinctive reach for my phone to check for new threats, new accusations, new crises. Just calm. Streamline was stable in a way it hadn't been since the first demand crossed Diane's lips. The board stopped asking if we were okay and started asking what's next. Clients signed longer contracts. Employees smiled more easily. Meetings were about innovation again, not survival, and I finally let myself exhale. Dad filed the final divorce paperwork 6 weeks later. The grounds were clinical on paper. Irreconcilable differences, financial coercion, but the truth was simpler. Diane had revealed who she was, and Dad could no longer pretend he didn't see it. Caleb moved into Dad's house permanently. His room was still half painted the wrong color, boxes stacked in corners like the house itself hadn't decided what it was yet. But he was lighter, quieter in a good way, less careful. One night, he asked me something I didn't expect. "Do you hate her?" he said. We were sitting on the floor of my living room, eating takeout, his homework spread between us. I thought about it. "No," I said slowly. "I don't trust her. I don't forgive what she did. But hate would mean she still has space in my life." He nodded like that made sense. Rebecca stayed gone. Philadelphia suited her, from what little I heard. Retail management wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with applause or titles that impressed strangers. But it came with schedules, accountability, and consequences. The things she'd never had before. 6 months after her message, I finally replied. One sentence. "I hope you build something that's yours." She responded with a single heart. That was enough. The investigation into Sandra Morrison dragged on quietly in the background. The legal system moved slower than Diane ever had, but it moved. Her license was suspended, then formally reviewed. When the letter came confirming her disbarment proceedings, I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt relieved because the system had done what it was supposed to do, because intimidation hadn't worked, because truth, documented and steady, had held. Streamline crossed $30 million in revenue that year, then 35. We expanded into 3 new markets, launched a second product line, promoted internally instead of hiring flashy outsiders. Devin bought his parents a house. Bailey paid off her sister's medical debt. Dr. Chen's early investment returned 8-fold. I raised my salary to $140,000, still below market, still conservative, but enough to stop feeling like stability was a luxury. And for the first time since I was 15, I stopped bracing for something to be taken away. Caleb started interning more seriously the following summer, not because he was my brother, because he was good, focused, curious, patient in a way most adults never are. One afternoon, I watched him walk Devin through a solution he'd found, hesitant but proud. Later, when we were alone, I asked him, "You sure you want this world?" He smiled, a little crooked. "I want to build something," he said. "Doesn't have to be this, but something real." I thought of my mother then, of how she'd wanted to be a pediatrician, but chose teaching because it was attainable, because she could still make a difference, of how she'd saved every spare dollar, not for herself, but for a future she wouldn't see, of how Diane had dismissed her as ordinary, and how wrong she'd been. 8 months after the confrontation, Dad asked me to meet him for coffee again. Same place, same table by the window, but this time he was smiling when I walked in. Not the brittle smile of someone trying to hold themselves together, a real one. "I'm doing better," he said. "Therapy's helping, a lot." "I can tell," I said. He looked around the cafe, then back at me. "I forgot how much I liked this place," he admitted. Forgot a lot of things, actually. We talked for hours about Mom, about the years he'd spent confusing grief with guilt, about how easy it is to let someone loud rewrite your memories if you're tired enough. "She predicted you," he said at one point, his voice soft. "Said you'd build something extraordinary, that you'd be stubborn and ethical and impossible to bend." I smiled. "She was right," I said. "About both of us, eventually." When I left the cafe, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something broken. I felt like I was walking forward. 4 years later, Streamline went public. 63 million valuation. I kept 38%, more than enough to retain control. The employees who'd stayed through the chaos became millionaires. Not overnight, but permanently. The night the numbers finalized, I stayed late in my office alone. The city stretched out beneath me, alive and indifferent and beautiful. I stood in front of the framed graduation card behind my desk for my brilliant daughter's dreams. No strings, just love and pride. Love, Dad. I touched the glass gently. Diane had tried to take my company, my peace, my family, my sense of legitimacy. Instead, she lost everything she tried to steal. Her marriage, her home, her sister's career, her daughter's respect. The greatest irony? She couldn't take the one thing that mattered most. What I built wasn't just a company. It was proof that quiet people aren't weak, that generosity doesn't mean surrender, that love without conditions is stronger than control dressed up as concern. They couldn't take what I earned. They couldn't steal what my mother believed into existence. And they never could. Not without my permission.